The boardroom stretched 47 floors above Manhattan, all glass and chrome, and the kind of silence that costs billions to maintain. 14 executives sat frozen around the mahogany table, their faces twisted between confusion and contempt as they watched a black man in a maintenance uniform walk through doors that security should have stopped him at 3 checkpoints ago. Richard Sterling stood at the head of the table, his presentation still glowing on the screen behind him, his carefully orchestrated coup dissolving in real time. His voice cracked with performative authority. "Security, remove this janitor immediately." The man in the blue uniform didn't flinch. He placed a USB drive on the polished wood with the calm precision of someone who had defused bombs under enemy fire. His name was Marcus Thompson, and 3 weeks ago he had been invisible to everyone in this room. "I'm not a janitor." The words landed like surgical instruments. "I'm Major Marcus Thompson, former Director of Combat Trauma Medicine, United States Army. And you, Mr. Sterling, have exactly 47 seconds to explain why you transferred $2.3 million from the Employee Pension Fund to a Cayman Islands account 6 days ago." The freeze frame of Sterling's face, shifting from contempt to raw terror, would haunt the financial pages for months. But to understand how a man everyone dismissed as nothing became the most dangerous person in a $4 billion empire, the story had to go back 21 days to a restaurant where chandeliers cost more than most people's annual salary, and where a 7-year-old girl in a second-hand dress taught a billionaire what courage actually looked like. 3 weeks earlier, Marcus Thompson woke at 5:47 a.m., 13 minutes before his alarm, the way he had every morning for the past 4 years, 2 months, and 11 days. The photograph on his nightstand caught the gray pre-dawn light, Sarah holding Lily at 3 years old, both of them laughing at something he couldn't remember anymore. The surgical error that killed his wife had been quick. The grief that followed was not. He moved through the small apartment with military efficiency, opening a refrigerator that held more condiments than food, checking the stack of bills on the counter. Rent due, $1,100. Bank balance, $847.23. The math never worked, but somehow he made it work anyway. Lily's room smelled like crayons and the lavender detergent he splurged on because Sarah had always said their daughter deserved soft things. He knelt beside her bed, brushing hair from her forehead. Her eyes fluttered open, still heavy with dreams. "Daddy, today's my science test. And you're going to crush it, my little scientist." She smiled, gap-toothed and perfect. "Daddy, when are you going to be a doctor again?" The question hit the same bruise it always did. He kept his voice light, his face steady. "I like my jobs now. I get to come home to you every night." What he didn't say, that he had been 4,000 miles away consulting on a battlefield surgery when Sarah's doctor called him mid-operation, that he had given guidance through a satellite phone while his wife bled out on a table he couldn't reach, that he had traded saving the world for the only thing that mattered now. The small, sacred world of one 7-year-old girl who needed him present, not heroic. Saturday evening arrived with the kind of anticipation that made Lily bounce on her toes the entire bus ride across town. She had scored perfect marks on her science test, and Marcus had saved for 3 weeks to take her somewhere with, in her words, sparkly lights like stars, but inside. The restaurant he found wasn't La Lumiere, the 5-star establishment next door, but a modest cafe that served excellent pasta at prices that wouldn't destroy him. The hostess at La Lumiere's entrance looked at them like something the wind had blown in by mistake. Her smile never reached her eyes as she scanned Marcus's faded button-down, Lily's second-hand dress with a small stain on the hem that wouldn't come out no matter how many times he scrubbed. Reservation? Thompson, 6:30, the cafe next door. Her relief was visible. Oh, that entrance is around the corner. But Lily had already seen the chandeliers through the interior doors, and her gasp of wonder made Marcus's chest ache. A staff member, distracted and hurried, waved them toward a small corner table inside the main dining room, apparently confusing their reservation with another. Marcus knew he should correct the mistake. He knew this wasn't their world. He sat down anyway. Just this once, he wanted his daughter to eat beneath stars that didn't cost extra on the electric bill. The whispers started within minutes. A woman at the next table, draped in pearls and disapproval, spoke loud enough to be heard 3 tables away. Standards have certainly declined. One wonders what the valet parking situation must be. Marcus kept his eyes on the menu, on the prices that made his stomach clench, on Lily's face still bright with wonder because she hadn't learned yet to hear the cruelty beneath polite words. He ordered the cheapest pasta on the menu and a glass of water, and he watched his daughter's joy like a man memorizing something precious. The commotion near the entrance pulled his attention. A woman in a black Valentino dress, blonde hair severe, expression carved from ice, swept through the dining room with a small boy clutching her hand. Era Voss. Her face was on every business magazine in the country. Her reputation for coldness legendary. Her net worth more than Marcus would earn in 1,000 lifetimes. But Marcus wasn't watching the billionaire. He was watching her son. The boy's eyes had locked onto Lily with the desperate longing of a child who had forgotten how to play. "Mom, I want to sit with them." Era Voss stopped. Her gaze swept over Marcus, over Lily, over the worn fabric and the water glasses and the single cheap pasta order. For a moment, Marcus saw calculation behind her eyes, the assessment of a woman who measured everything in leverage and liability. Then she looked at her son, and something fractured in her expression. "My son wishes to join your table. May we?" Lily beamed, already scooting over. "Yes. Sit here." The children connected instantly, their laughter cutting through the restaurant's suffocating pretension. Marcus found himself across from a woman who commanded boardrooms and destroyed competitors, and for several minutes, neither of them spoke. He focused on cutting Lily's pasta into small, manageable pieces, the way Sarah had taught him, 45-degree angles, consistent pressure, no wasted motion. "Sir, can you cut mine too?" Evan's small voice startled both adults. The boy was watching Marcus's hands with naked longing, and Marcus understood immediately. This child had never asked anyone but paid staff for something this simple. He reached for Evan's plate. "Of course, buddy." Era Voss watched him work, and her brow furrowed with recognition. Before she could speak, her face went pale. Her hand trembled against the table. Marcus saw the signs instantly, the same way he had seen them in soldiers pushed past, breaking, blood sugar crashing under impossible stress. He grabbed a sugar packet from the coffee service, pressed it into her palm. "Eat this, now, then drink the water slowly." She stared at him, this maintenance worker giving her orders, but her body recognized the authority of someone who had given life or death commands, and she obeyed. Color returned to her cheeks in slow degrees. "How did you know?" "Lucky guess," but they both knew it wasn't luck. And 3 hours later, when Marcus received a text from an unknown number asking him to meet in the basement of the building where he worked his night shift, he understood that whatever came next would change everything. He just didn't know that the woman waiting for him in the shadows would ask him to help her find out who in her own company was trying to destroy her. 2 days passed before Era Voss made contact again. She had spent those 48 hours running background checks through channels that didn't officially exist, pulling military records that should have been sealed, confirming what her instincts had told her the moment she watched a maintenance worker's hands move with surgical precision. Major Marcus Thompson, Distinguished Service Cross, Director of Combat Trauma Medicine, deployed to 3 active war zones, honorable discharge 4 years ago, 2 weeks after his wife's death. The basement of Voss Tower smelled like industrial cleaner and recycled air. Era stood in the shadows near the mechanical room, wearing a hoodie instead of couture, her face bare of makeup. She looked smaller without the armor of wealth, more human, more desperate. I need someone I can trust. Her voice carried none of the boardroom authority Marcus had witnessed. Everyone in my orbit has a price. My assistant reports to someone. My security chief takes calls he thinks I don't know about. My own COO is building a case to have me declared mentally unfit. Marcus leaned against a concrete pillar, arms crossed. You don't know me. I know you have a 7-year-old daughter. I know you work 2 jobs and never complain. I know you looked at me like a person having a medical crisis, not a bank account with legs. That's more than I can say for anyone on my payroll. What exactly are you asking? You work nights. You have access to every floor. You're invisible to them. She stepped closer, and in the harsh fluorescent light, Marcus could see the exhaustion carved into her features. Richard Sterling is planning a coup. He's been gathering evidence of my supposed instability for months. I need to know who's helping him, and I need proof before the quarterly shareholder meeting in 3 weeks. Marcus thought of Lily, of the bills on his counter, of the careful equilibrium he had built from the wreckage of his former life. I have conditions. Name them. I report facts only. No fabrication, no interpretation. My daughter comes first. If this threatens her in any way, I walk. And if I find out you've done something wrong, I tell you to your face. Era's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. That's exactly why I chose you. The following morning, Lily sat at the breakfast table with her cereal untouched, her small face troubled in ways that made Marcus's chest tighten. Daddy, why did those people look at us like that? He knelt beside her chair, bringing himself to her eye level. What do you mean, baby? At the fancy restaurant, the lady with the necklace. She looked at us like we were dirty, but we weren't dirty. I checked my dress 3 times. The innocence of the statement shattered something inside him. He took her hands, small and warm, and chose his words with the same care he had once used to deliver fatal diagnoses to soldiers' families. Some people look at the outside and think they know everything about the inside. They see skin color, or old clothes, or the job someone works, and they decide that's the whole story. But they're wrong, Lily. They're always wrong. Does it make you sad? It makes me sad that you had to see it. But I want you to remember something. He squeezed her hands gently. Dignity isn't something anyone can take from you. It's yours. The only way to lose it is to give it away. She nodded slowly, processing, and then her face brightened with the resilience of children who haven't yet learned to hold on to pain. "Daddy, can we have pancakes tomorrow?" "Absolutely, scientist. Now finish your cereal." 47 floors above the street, Richard Sterling conducted his war from a corner office with views that made lesser men feel godlike. His silver hair was immaculate, his suit handmade in Milan, his confidence the product of 58 years of never being told no by anyone who mattered. The phone pressed to his ear carried a voice he had cultivated for 6 years. "The video of her collapse needs to look natural. Melissa will position herself during the next high-stress meeting. One more public breakdown, and the fitness clause becomes undeniable." The voice on the other end belonged to connections Sterling had built across decades of corporate warfare. "The Cayman account is ready for the next transfer. 2.3 million clears the pension audit trail. And the discrimination complaints? 73 cases over 6 years, all buried in HR archives. No one's looking." Sterling smiled at his reflection in the window glass. 3 weeks. Then I'll be the one sitting in her chair. Marcus began his investigation that night, moving through Voss Tower with the patient thoroughness of a man trained to find threats in chaos. He fixed a ventilation unit on the 47th floor and listened through the ductwork to Sterling's phone calls. He replaced light fixtures on 32 and noticed the HR director shredding documents at 11 p.m. He repaired a jammed door on 44 and found Melissa, Era's assistant, sending encrypted messages from a burner phone hidden in her desk drawer. By the 4th night, he had made contact with James, a young HR analyst who had stumbled onto the same patterns Marcus was tracking. The kid's hands shook as he showed Marcus his phone screen. 73 discrimination complaints, all filed by employees of color, all marked resolved with no action taken, all signed off by the same 3 executives. "I've been here 2 years. I thought it was just bureaucracy." James's voice cracked. "But this is systematic. They're not ignoring these cases. They're burying them." Night 7 brought the discovery that changed everything. Marcus found a hidden camera in Era's private office, installed by someone with security clearance, feeding footage to a server that traced back to Sterling's personal network. Night 9 revealed the financial records, pension fund transfers disguised as operational expenses, money flowing to offshore accounts with Sterling's digital fingerprint on every transaction. By night 10, Marcus sat in his apartment at 6 a.m., eyes burning, laptop open to a folder containing 47 audio files, 23 internal emails, 12 financial receipts, and the documentation of 73 families whose complaints had been silenced. This wasn't just a coup. This was systematic theft and institutional racism operating in parallel, 2 cancers feeding the same corrupted body. Era came to his apartment that evening, slipping through the back entrance of his building like someone who had never had to hide from anything in her life. She sat across from him at his small kitchen table, studying the evidence he had compiled, her face shifting through disbelief into cold fury. "How did you do this in 10 days? "Training." He closed the laptop. "But there's something else you need to see." He pulled up the final document, the one that had made him pause for 3 hours before deciding to show her. The signature at the bottom of the original HR policy that enabled the complaint suppression system. Victoria Voss, Ara's mother, dated 12 years ago. The color drained from Ara's face. Her hands gripped the edge of the table. "She built this. The foundation was laid before you took over. Sterling inherited a machine. He just made it more efficient." "I didn't know." Her voice was barely a whisper. "I swear I didn't know." Marcus watched her struggle with the weight of legacy, the sins of a mother she had idolized. His voice was gentle when he spoke. "You're not her. You can choose differently." 3 days later, Sterling made his move. Marcus received a summons to the COO's office, a request phrased as casual but carrying the unmistakable weight of a threat. He walked into the corner office knowing his cover was blown, knowing that everything he had built was about to be tested. Sterling didn't bother with pleasantries. "Major Thompson, fascinating reading, your service record. Even more fascinating, your recent activities in my building." Marcus remained standing, his posture relaxed, his eyes steady. "If you have concerns about my maintenance work, you can file a complaint with the contractor." "Let's not pretend." Sterling rose from his desk, circling like a predator who had cornered prey. "I know what you've been collecting. I know who you've been talking to. And I know you have a daughter at Jefferson Elementary who walks home alone on Tuesdays and Thursdays." The temperature in the room dropped. Marcus felt the familiar calm that had settled over him in combat zones, the absolute clarity that came when stakes became lethal. "I've been watching you, Thompson. Consider this a professional courtesy." Sterling's smile never reached his eyes. "Delete what you found. Disappear from Ara's life. And your daughter will never have to wonder why strange men are taking photographs of her school." Marcus stepped closer. Close enough that Sterling's cologne couldn't mask the fear sweat beneath it. His voice dropped to the register he had used to command surgical teams under mortar fire. "You just threatened a federal witness in a building with security cameras on every floor. 18 months of maintenance work means I know exactly which ones have blind spots and which ones don't." He tapped his chest where a small microphone was hidden beneath his uniform. "This conversation has been recording since I walked through your door. FBI received a copy 60 seconds after you mentioned my daughter's school." Sterling's face went gray. "You have 2 choices now." Marcus held his gaze without blinking. "Cooperate when they come for you, or spend the next 48 hours trying to run." "But I've faced men who would have eaten you alive before their morning coffee. You're not scary. You're just expensive." He turned and walked out, leaving Sterling standing in his corner office, his empire crumbling around him, his threats dissolving into the evidence that would bury him. That night, Marcus sat on Lily's bed while she drifted toward sleep, her small hand wrapped around his finger. "Daddy, is tomorrow important?" "Very important, baby." "Are you scared?" He brushed hair from her forehead, the same gesture Sarah had made 1,000 times. "A little, but I'm doing it for the right reasons. Sometimes being brave means doing the scary thing anyway." Lily's eyes fluttered closed. "You're still my superhero, Daddy." Marcus stayed until her breathing deepened into dreams. In the morning, everything would change. But tonight, in the amber glow of a second-hand nightlight, he had everything that mattered. The quarterly shareholder meeting convened at 9 a.m. sharp. 14 board members arranged around the mahogany table like judges at a tribunal they believed they controlled. Sterling stood at the head of the room, his presentation loaded, his allies positioned, his victory seemingly assured. The video of Ara's collapse at La Lumiere played on loop in the background, damning evidence of a woman unfit to lead. Ara sat at the far end, pale but composed, her hands folded on the table. Beside her, 2 empty chairs waited. The doors opened. Marcus walked in wearing his maintenance uniform, Lily's hand in his left, Evan's in his right. The children moved with the solemn purpose of soldiers who understood their role without needing explanation. Sterling's rehearsed confidence faltered for half a second before his sneer reasserted itself. Security should have stopped you at the lobby. Security works for the building, not for you. Marcus released the children's hands, and they moved to stand beside Era, a small, fierce wall of loyalty. He placed the USB drive on the table with the deliberate care of a man laying down a winning hand. I believe you were about to invoke the fitness clause. Please, continue. The board members exchanged uncertain glances. Mrs. Harding, the woman whose pearls had dripped contempt 3 weeks earlier, leaned forward with predatory interest. Miss Voss, who is this person? Era rose. Her voice carried none of the tremor Marcus had heard in the restaurant, none of the vulnerability of their late-night conversations. This was the CEO who had built an empire from her mother's shadow, and she was finally ready to step out of it. This is Major Marcus Thompson, former Director of Combat Trauma Medicine for the United States Army. He's been conducting an independent investigation into financial irregularities and systemic discrimination within this company. I suggest you listen carefully. Marcus commandeered the presentation screen, replacing Sterling's carefully curated narrative with the truth. The first slide showed a network diagram. Sterling at the center, lines connecting to Melissa, the HR director, the CFO, 3 department heads, all bound by documented communications and financial trails. This isn't a fitness concern. This is a coordinated conspiracy to defraud shareholders and systematically suppress civil rights complaints. His voice filled the room without rising, the calm authority of a man who had briefed generals under fire. 47 recorded conversations documenting the planning of Miss Voss's removal, 23 internal emails referencing Operation Overthrow, 12 financial transfers totaling $2.3 million, diverted from the employee pension fund to offshore accounts controlled by Mr. Sterling. The second slide displayed 73 names, dates, complaint summaries, 73 employees of color who had reported discrimination, 73 cases marked resolved without action, 47 of those employees terminated within 6 months of filing. 6 years of institutional racism buried by HR protocols designed to protect perpetrators rather than victims. Marcus met the eyes of each board member in turn. Every signature, every approval, every cover-up is documented. The FBI received copies at 7 a.m. this morning. They're currently executing search warrants on Mr. Sterling's home and office. Sterling's face had progressed through denial, rage, and terror, settling now on desperate calculation. This is absurd. This man is a janitor with a grudge. You're going to take his word over mine? I'm not asking anyone to take my word. Marcus pulled up the audio file, Sterling's voice filling the room with crystal clarity. Your daughter walks home alone on Tuesdays and Thursdays. The board members recoiled. Mrs. Harding's hand flew to her pearls, this time in genuine shock rather than theatrical disdain. Ara stepped forward, and when she spoke, her voice carried the weight of generations finally being held accountable. My mother built the system that enabled this. I inherited it without understanding what I was inheriting. That ends today. She outlined the reforms. Independent review of all 73 cases. Compensation and reinstatement offers to terminated employees. Establishment of the Voss Equity Foundation with $10 million in initial funding. This company will not be a monument to injustice. Not anymore. The boardroom doors opened again. 2 FBI agents entered, badges displayed, expressions professionally neutral. The taller one approached Sterling with handcuffs already in hand. "Richard Sterling, you're under arrest for wire fraud, embezzlement, and witness intimidation. You have the right to remain silent." Sterling's composure finally shattered. "You can't do this. I built this company's operations for 12 years. I made this place profitable." Marcus watched him being led away, feeling nothing like triumph. "You made yourself rich by stealing from people who trusted you. That's not building. That's parasitism." The news cycle devoured the story within hours. CNN led with the arrest footage, Sterling's silk tie askew, his silver hair disheveled, his face the portrait of entitlement meeting consequence. The New York Times ran a feature on the 73 victims, their stories finally given space and credence. Financial analysts dissected the pension fraud while social commentators examined the discrimination patterns, connecting Voss Industries to larger conversations about corporate accountability. Era held a press conference that evening, Marcus standing beside her, both children visible in the background. She announced his appointment as Chief Strategy and Employee Welfare Officer, a position created specifically to ensure what happened under Sterling's watch could never happen again. Reporters shouted questions about their relationship, about his background, about the dramatic reversal of fortune. Marcus answered none of them. His job was done. The spotlight belonged to the 73 families who were finally being heard. 6 months later, Marcus sat before the Senate Labor Committee in Washington, his uniform replaced by a modest suit. His testimony part of a federal investigation that had expanded to 127 companies across 18 states. The DOJ had used the Voss Industries evidence as a template, uncovering similar patterns of suppression and retaliation throughout the corporate landscape. "Mr. Thompson, your investigation has led to the largest workplace discrimination reform initiative in 2 decades. What drove you to take such personal risk?" Marcus considered the question, thinking of Lily's face when she asked why people looked at them differently, of Sarah's voice in his memory urging him to protect the world he could reach. "I'm a father. I wanted my daughter to grow up in a country where her complaints would be heard, not buried. 73 families at Voss Industries deserved the same thing. So do the 2,300 families your committee has identified since." The senator nodded slowly. "And what would you say to others who witness institutional injustice but feel powerless to act? Dignity isn't given. It's claimed." Marcus leaned into the microphone, knowing Lily was watching from home, knowing millions of others were watching too. The people who built these systems counted on silence. They counted on fear. But silence is a choice, and so is speaking. Sometimes the most revolutionary act is simply refusing to look away. 1 year after the restaurant where it all began, California sunlight turned the Pacific into hammered gold. Marcus sat on the sand beside Era, watching Lily and Evan chase waves with the tireless energy of children who had learned to be siblings without sharing blood. "She asked me if you were going to be her new mom." Marcus kept his eyes on the water, on the silhouettes of 2 kids who had found in each other what their complicated families couldn't always provide. Ara's hand found his, warm and certain. "What did you tell her?" "That families aren't made by paperwork. They're made by showing up." Lily ran toward them, breathless, clutching a shell shaped like a heart. "Daddy, look what we found. Evan says it's for both of you." Evan appeared beside her, shy but smiling. more animated than Marcus had ever seen him. "Mom, can we stay forever?" Era laughed, the sound free of the brittle control that had defined her for so long. "Let's start with dinner and see where it goes." Later, after the children had exhausted themselves and the sunset had faded to violet, Marcus stood at the water's edge, feeling the cold Pacific rush over his feet. Sarah's photograph lived on his nightstand still, a memorial and a permission both. She had always told him that love wasn't finite, that the heart expanded to hold whatever it needed to hold. He had spent 4 years believing his capacity for connection had died with her. He had been wrong. The Voss Equity Foundation had supported 2,847 families in its first year. The Senate investigation had resulted in criminal charges against 43 executives and policy changes affecting millions of workers. Lily had won first place at the National Science Fair, her project on renewable energy dedicated to "my daddy, who taught me that small things can change the world." And Marcus Thompson, the maintenance man who had walked invisible through towers of power, had discovered that the most important repairs weren't to buildings or machines or even institutions. They were to the belief, fragile and essential, that justice was possible, that dignity was inalienable, that one person's courage could ripple outward until it became a wave. The tide pulled at his ankles, the stars emerged overhead, and somewhere behind him, his daughter's laughter mingled with the laughter of a boy who had become her brother in every way that mattered. Marcus turned back toward the light, toward the family that had assembled itself from broken pieces, toward the future he had finally allowed himself to imagine. Some stories end with vengeance. This one ended with something harder to achieve and infinitely more valuable. It ended with hope.